I got the sign, you can start. So I'm happy to welcome you here at the very last lesson we have, the session 3. My name is Kerstin Blumenstein. I'm a researcher here at the University of Applied Sciences, St. Pölten, at the Institute of Creative Media Technologies. Okay, sorry, I have to learn the institute's name. And the topic of the session is human-computer interaction, in short HCI. And we start with a talk by Gerhard Sprung. I can't spell the first ViReSt. Is it short ViReSt? Or is it correctly? The longer, better name is storytelling with volumetric videos.
1, 2. Okay. Welcome to my talk. I will explain what ViReSt is in short time. First, I'd like to switch on my computer. Okay. First, I'd like to talk about the surrounding area of knowledge. I start with movie. The art of movie making is now more than 100 years old. That means since more than 100 years, the tools have been developed and improved. The tools that enable movie makers to create compelling films, to make this efficiently. I'd like to talk a little bit about these tools. So when you have an idea and you want to make a movie, you start to scribble down your ideas in a very standardized form. This form is called the movie script, or script in short. This is, as I said, very standardized in the linear form of literature. There are almost only the dialogues written down, so it is just to communicate the first ideas. The next step is to visualize all the shots that you will use in your movie, and this is done by scribbling. Drawing is them on a sheet of paper, pinning them to a wall. This is then called a storyboard, and then you can watch the movie like a comic strip. In the next phase, the director starts his work, and the director has a whole bunch of tools to guide the view, the attention of the viewers to exactly the point in the screen, in the frame where it needs to be to tell the story, to show something or to hide something. For example, you can position the camera nearer to the subject, far away. You can turn the camera, you can put it upwards, downwards. You can move the camera during the shot. You can use different lenses, so you can have different fields of view. You can different focus, so a shallow focus, for example, to concentrate on a special object. You can use framing. You can use symbols, color, light and shadows, of course. You can use the position, the movement, and the angle of the characters, of the actors. And then, when all shots are done, when you have all in the camera, you can, in the next step, with editing, just change the order of these cuts and therefore change the meaning. So you can put the viewer somewhere else. Okay, now we know the tools that are available today. Since some years, virtual reality is an upcoming technology, and now it is developed enough so that you can create films with virtual reality. And just to explain, because I saw yesterday there are different definitions of virtual reality and 3D. When I talk about virtual reality, I mean genuine 3D objects, genuine 3D scenes, so all the objects are generated in 3D. You can walk around, so you can choose your viewpoint. And when I'm talking about interactive virtual reality, that means that you can also change the plot by your decisions as a viewer. So this is what I'm talking about. The question now is, can we use the tools that have been developed for standard film in creating interactive virtual reality movies? Let's have a look. We cannot use the script because we have, in our case, a branching story and a script is a highly linear form of literature. You cannot use the storyboards because we cannot predict what the viewers will see in a specific time and situation. We cannot use the position of the camera, the rotation of the camera, the height of the camera, because this is chosen by the viewer. We cannot use filters, field of view, because you have always this 360-degree video, so 60-degree view, not video, and changing the focus is not yet possible in VR. You can not use the motion, the movement of the camera, because it causes nausea. We can not use cutting, because it is very strange if you are in VR, in an immersive VR situation, and then just from one moment to the other, you are somewhere else. Nobody will know what's happening. So the only things you can use is working with light and what the actors do. But even there, you can't be sure if the viewer will see what the actors do, because probably he has chosen to look at the other direction. So I guess we can agree that there is a lot of work to do to provide the movie makers that will create interactive or virtual reality movies in the future. We have to provide them with new tools and a new workflow. And this is something we chose as a new research field around 1 year ago in our university, in our department at the University of Applied Sciences, FHU Neum. The department is Information Management. As we chose this topic as our internal research direction for the next years, and our first prototype for creating a workflow we called ViReSt, Virtual Reality Storytelling. As we usually work with user-centered design, we tried to do something similar here. We created a use case. A use case, that means we imagined how a situation could look like where we can create such a movie. The use case is a museum wants to provide an interactive exhibition, and they want to place the visitors in a historical scene. The visitors should be able to talk with historical figures or persons, and they should be able to influence what's going on. And the great challenge was we want to create a workflow so that the curators of the museum are able to create most of this without prior knowledge in programming and virtual and 3D. So this is the premise, and now we started our research, which of the tools we can use, where we found tools that are available, and where we have to create something new. The first step was rather easy, to replace the storyboard and the script. We found out there are actually tools that are similar. These are tools to create interactive text-based adventures. They are usually based on HTML, so you create with kind of an editor an interactive story with links, and in the player you jump from HTML page to HTML page. You can use pictures, video and audio on each page. So this is kind of a replacement for an interactive story storyboard for our kind of movie. That was the easy part. To realize this story, this interactive story, we had to produce something new. My student in his thesis created this editor. In this editor, you can define objects that will appear in the 3D, in the virtual reality scene. You can define actions of this object, which are nothing more than say this sentence or make this move. You can create triggers. So when is an action started or ended? And you can create variables, which are very, very, very important. And with this editor, you can create a really, really complex story. The result of this editor is a bunch of instructions that is stored in a file and then imported in our game engine. We use Unity, and there, according to this information, the objects are created and act accordingly. The next step was the most challenging. We had to find a way that our curators in the museum can digitize persons, use them in the interactive story, and as I told you, without programming knowledge and without being able to work in 3D. Now I'd like to give an overview how something like this is done usually for the game industry, because the game industry uses such applications, of course. Usually you have to create a so-called mesh in the 3D space. The mesh is done by digitizing a person with 3D scanning. This is done with lasers, structured light, or in the last time with photogrammetry technologies. The result is then a mathematical representation in 3D space. Usually you take this pose because this is easier to animate later. It's a big effort to get to such a high resolution mesh, but it's possible. The next thing is you want to animate it. To animate it means you have to create bones, a skeleton, where each bone deforms one part of this mesh. And to acquire the movement, the animation, the action, you have to use the technology of motion capture. Motion capture is usually done this way. You glue some markers on the joints or the limbs of the actor. Then several cameras record when the actor makes this movement that is necessary. Then these markers are by the software tracked, so the position is measured every frame, then calculated, so you find out where in space is which point when, and from this you can calculate the movement and the position or rotation of each bone, and this animation then can be transferred to the bones in the VR. So rather complicated, and with all the hardware and software, very expensive way to do this, and absolutely not possible to do for people who have no prior knowledge. Okay, we thought this is not the right solution. Researching, doing further research, we found that there is another approach upcoming in the next years. This is called the so-called free viewpoint video or volumetric video, which is at the moment developed by Microsoft and some other companies like 8i. This is kind of 3D scanning 50 times a second, storing all the information. So you don't need any bones anymore. The animation and the body, the surface is acquired at the same time. But this, on the one hand, is very, very complicated, a huge amount of data, and it's not available yet. So we had to do further research, but the idea was clear. This is done by the help of photogrammetry techniques and depth cameras. And the depth camera is for us the solution. I have here very old material. This is from Minority Report. There was a kind of a hologram. Perhaps you see it here. And exactly this idea, to record the depth of the camera and create a surface from it. This idea we used for our approach. It's nothing we have invented, but it was used for some music videos about 5 or 6 years ago, but then I haven't seen very much of this, and there are no tools available at the moment, so we had to create our own. So what we did, we used the Kinect camera. Probably you know it. This is the camera that is shipped with the Xbox, the game console of Microsoft, and this camera is able to record a depth with the depth image and a color image at the same time. We saved the result side by side in a movie, and then we used this image in our 3D environment to create a 2.5D image. So the color image was used to color all the, not pixels, but the vertices, the points of a mesh. And the depth image, this is the color layer, the red color layer of this image, was used to deform the object. It was first tessellated, so subdivided, to deform this image. And the black color here shows where this object is invisible, so the transparency. So with this technology, we were able to create our prototype, and as we tried to achieve, it was possible to do without any programming and without expensive hardware. And we made a demo scene where with a head-mounted display, stereoscopic display, you can walk around in this prison cell. Depending on what you do, other persons appear, talk to you. You can talk to these persons because we had implemented a speech recognition and binaural audio as far it is implemented in Unity. So it was very successful. We did a small usability test with 10 persons, and we were rather satisfied with the results. Some seconds of a movie, and then I will close. So this is just how it looks when you look around. Here you see, as you are in the scene alone in this prison cell, all the other people that are appearing are kind of ghosts. So, and they are talking to you, and you can talk to them. And especially the binaural sound was very important because you heard exactly where this person is speaking. So our participants just turned around and wanted to know where the sound is coming from. Okay, I thank you for your attention, and probably you have some questions.
Thank you, Gerhard. There's the first question. I've seen it.
Thanks for the interesting talk. One question: did you consider using 2 or more Kinects and register the 2.5D movies or the point clouds from one side together to have like a full or better representation?
Yes, we considered it, but that would be a really hard thing to for the programming, because they are very distorted, the images, because they are from one point, so they are not parallel. So you have to recalculate all the or remove all the distortion from the camera, so that you can fit these 2 parts together. We will try it with not with a mesh, but with point clouds. This is easier. This is one of our ideas for the next time. Yeah, there are several. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Yep.
Thank you. Could you use this technology to integrate virtual scenes into real, already filmed 3D movies?
Only to a certain degree, because I could replace the prison cell with a photography, a 360 photograph, or even a movie. But if you are moving too far, then the perspective doesn't fit anymore. So this can only be the background, and then you would have to use other objects, additionally 3D objects in the foreground. Then the illusion could be achieved, yes.
Are there any other questions? I would like to know, what did the user said? So you said you had some users in testing what
the users were really satisfied with the kind of viewing and the immersion, but rather disappointing for me. They liked we did some tests how the depth information of these virtual actors are looking for the users, and they preferred rather flat visualizations. Probably because of these fringes, we could get rid of these fringes. This was our first attempt, so we will have to create a new version of this shader and try it again. But this was one of the results, and another result was that the user said they don't want to speak loud when they have a headset on their head. So this is something which is of course to be considered when you want to use something like that in a museum.
Last chance for question. Oh yeah, no, I should not ask this question.
There's always a next question.
Well, very interesting, because we have kind of the same research topic. I'm quite not so sure that at the beginning you were showing some slides what would work on VR and not, and I'm not sure that I would be saying, for example, the editing. There is some editing done in VR. So I think this is a little bit too general. I mean, it's good. You have to think it differently, and you also have to think different in media analysis and of course storytelling. But just to cross them out and say, well, it's not working. I would maybe we can elaborate that a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. Of course, I had to put the things very short, and of course you can have editing in VR, but only when the viewer is aware that now the edit comes. So you cannot, like in a movie, just cut, and the brain adds the thing. You would be absolutely disturbed. You don't know where you are now. If you're just flash and you are somewhere else. It's like perhaps you've seen Lost, so I think this would be like that. Just being somewhere else, in another time, you don't know where. So you can use it, but with caution.
Okay. Thanks, Gerhard again.
Thank you.
Gerhard again. So then I welcome on stage the first woman as a presenter. No, for the day, I think. I'm not sure about the last days. And I hand over the mic, but beforehand I will introduce you. So we have here Stefanie Braunisch and Roither, and they are presenting as visual forms of presentation of investigative online journalism in Austrian media.
Yes, welcome to our presentation. We're also dealing with visualization of information in a completely different way, so we hope you enjoy it. Just one sentence about myself. I'm Professor for Media and Communication at University of Applied Sciences Burgenland, and I give the word to my colleague, which is...
Yes, I'm Stefanie Braunisch. I'm an investigative journalist for Addendum, also focusing on data, and well, it's the same topic as you can see. So I just want to start with the basics. Just so you get a sense for the topic, investigative journalism is usually well specified by a few characteristics. It needs to be of social relevance, because otherwise, why would you bother? And investigating means going into depth, and you need to look into things. Usually it's about things that deal with power and how the state works and what people in power do. And over the course of time, the term the fourth estate was coined for this, because it's about controlling what the public body, the state basically, does. And considering topics, that means that you look into social injustice, that you look into grievances, and that you try to find out where corruption or mismanagement happened and why. And the other definition we thought might be useful is about online journalism. You probably know what it is, but the most important aspect of it is that you don't need to think of how can I present it so I can transport it, like printing a newspaper, or you need a TV for something, but what you have defines of how you can bring it to the audience. So the content defines the presentation, and that means much more possibilities, like including audio, video, text, and documents, and so on. So this interactivity and the different forms are the USP of online that really need to be considered. And we were looking into how these aspects were considered in actual use of media. At first, we were trying to look at 5 media outlets that were based on investigative journalism. We chose newspapers and online platforms that were working a little bit slower, because the depth of the research just means that investigative journalism needs more time, which is also why there are fewer investigative pieces, for example, in daily newspapers. So we were looking at the online platforms Dossier and Addendum, which are focusing on investigative and data journalism, as well as the weekly newspapers Falter, Profil, and News. You can see that we only analyzed 4, because News at the moment of our research didn't have any investigative content on the website, which just means that they need a relaunch, I think. And in the end, there were 10 articles per medium that we were looking at. At first, we're going to look at print-based, because the first realization we had was that it really makes a difference how something is constructed. And it seems like print media is still print media, and the thought of going online has not brought enough differences yet. You can see that basically every article had a header image. There are 2 less at Falter, which is the blue bar, because they had 2 videos as well as the homepage. Both media used displays as a preceding image. We think the thought comes from how it is in print, that you have a picture with an article. And in the 2 cases, the article was focusing on the video that were given to Falter to report about it. And then you have 1 picture and the original document embedded on the website of Profil, but that doesn't really make that big of a difference. If you're now looking at online media, you see much more. Sorry that it's maybe a little bit too much, but I think you can see how the differences are. On the right side, you see that there is a strong focus on using quotes, which just means that simple sentences are put into the focus to loosen up the text flow and make it easier for the consumer to know where the focus is. You can also see that there is a big focus on data journalism. If you're looking at the right side, where you have different kinds of networks or bars or charts, where you have another difference between the media with that is that you have interactivity with addendum and static data visualization at Dossier, which is actually not that bad of a difference, because the interactivity on the side of addendum is in many cases only a mouse over, so you can see the number of the bar as well. But yeah, that's actually the main findings of looking how visualization is practiced right now in investigative journalism. And now I'm going to give the mic away so you can get some of the backgrounds in how this visualization is coming to, and what journalists think behind doing that.
Thank you. So summing it up, you see that, and this is also something that we will come back to later on, that especially the print-based media are very slow in developing any ideas for online. Can be also on purpose, we're not sure. That would have been another question that we should ask them. But the online-based or also online-founded media like Addendum and Dossier, they're much more interested and aware of the possibilities that they have in online. What we did in addition to that, also with our colleague Michael Zeiller, who already did a presentation today, so he gave the floor to us for this presentation. But together with students, we were also doing an online survey on the visual presentations used by Austrian investigative journalists. And this is quite interesting. Few demographic aspects before I go into depth. 109 participants, we're very happy about that. It's very difficult these days to get participants when you ask journalists. Most of them male, in this case no surprise, also represents the general field. Also, most of the journalists over 40 in this regard. Also no surprise, because especially investigative journalism is usually more connected to experienced journalists than to young journalists. My colleague, of course, is an exception, and Addendum as a whole, as a media, is also not the typical one. So let's talk about the details. First of all, which genres, which topics do investigative journalists cover? No surprise here, but it's underlining. It's politics, it's economy mostly, it's society and social topics that are very important for investigative reporting. So these are usually the fields that that you would also connect with that. Interesting are also the sources. I will also come back to that later on, because we see that there is also different sources when it comes to different media. We see that especially the let's say online-based media that I was mentioning, that they are usually also more up for example, using data sets for data journalistic analysis, whereas the others in general rely on the usual suspects, I wanted to say, no. The usual informations, the informants, the public web sources, the on-site inspections and stuff. So also a change here. When it comes to the media types that they use, it's simple. Text is still very important. Pictures, infographics, and there is a very low use of video and audio. Kind of also relates to what we saw when we were inspected the media that Steffi Braunisch was telling us about. So pretty similar. Interesting is that when you ask the same journalists about the importance of different media types, then they say something different. It's again text, it's again pictures, it's again infographics, but there is a large part of the journalists is also aware of the fact that video and audio might be also interesting or useful for more complex things like investigative reports or reportages, but still they are not using them. Usage of journalistic text styles slowly shifts, but it's also to a large part what you expect. It's reports, of course, it's reportage, which is a very good format for investigative reporting, news items, columns. So this is something that we were also expecting. All in all, conclusions. Investigation, first of all, is sparsely represented in Austria. This is not something for this audience, we know that, but we have to state that it's the case. Like Steffi was also mentioning that we were searching for online investigative journalism. Within newspapers, it was almost impossible to get enough use cases to do a proper study on that. It was possible with the so to say bigger ones like Falter, Profil, News, Addendum, Dossier. But still, it was not easy. So there's a large part missing when it comes to investigative journalism in Austria. Secondly, we mentioned that, but it's a very important point for us. Media that are primarily geared to online presence use more and more different visual and structural forms of presentation than the others. However, also their use is not where it could be. We were also doing research on interactivity factors, for example. Is there something else than just infographics, pictures, videos, mouse overs, whatever? When it comes to that, it's a very limited use, to a very limited extent. That's also something where there's a big potential also if you look at it in a positive way. And of course, the online based media that we also mentioned, Addendum and Dossier, they have the problem that in comparison, for example, to Falter and to Profil, they have a very low audience reach, which means that even with their high quality content that they do and the forms that they try to use, they are not reaching as much people as the others do, still mostly print-based. Yes, I also mentioned that, but just to underline also that, we also saw that especially these media are also interested in using new sources. We're not sure to which extent, for example, Profil, which is of course a very good investigative media, uses, for example, data sets to analyze things, but we think from what we saw and what was represented, they are not doing it to a very large extent. So that's something that's probably also more connected to the new platforms. Just to underline also that, also an important conclusion, the journalists themselves, they are mostly also related, they relate their work mostly to text, pictures, infographics, yes, but video and audio, despite the fact that they find them important, they're not using them really. Might be a lack of competence, might be a lack of resources also. For example, when you look at news as a medium, they cut back enormously when it comes to resources, people whatsoever. So might be also, the root might be also there. Yes. What could be a solution? All these studies that we did, they are also kind of pre-studies for a research proposal that we want to do. If somebody is interested to talk about and join, we're happy to do so. The idea is to kind of create a reproducible prototype for investigative online journalism that is easier to use, that is not creating a lot of barriers when it comes to competencies and resources. We know, of course, this is something that is very difficult, but at the moment we have just a few media that are really, really good in what they do, but it's a lot of money that is invested in that. And to reach a larger audience in a more simply and cost-effectively way, it's very, very difficult at the moment. So this is something that might probably also be something of use for society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are open for questions.
What should this prototype do, just roughly, or what could be the functionality?
Well, I think you can compare it to some tools that are already there, because if you look at what kind of visualizations are used, for example, when it comes to graphic and data visualization, there's a big role of programs like Data Wrapper. So what you would need is a tool that gives you an even easier way to, I don't know, put data in or imagine a kind of picture and then throw that out again. There are, for example, some tools for timelines, and in such a way you could, I don't know, maybe it would be aim to get something that is a mask for the whole process, more steps than only visualization of investigative journalism. So in that kind of way, that would be the thought of how it should work. Yeah.
Yes, an integrated tool. Because, for example, when I'm doing an online story, I'm still working occasionally as a journalist, and I'm doing an online story, there are, like she said, maybe 3, 4, 5 different useful tools for bits and pieces of what the whole thing is about. But if there is no prior knowledge how to use those things, and if there is no, let's say you have to know certain things. You don't have to be a data scientist. Thank God, because I'm not. But you have to have a certain prior knowledge, and you have to know where to find things, how to use things. it's not very easy. And this is the part of the production side. The other side is how you present those things. So to visualize them in an easy way. There are tools for that, of course, as well, but still you have to have a lot of prior knowledge to form that. And I think that more and more media companies would also take a step forward if it would be slightly easier and also cheaper, because it's not about just the cost of tools, it's also about the time and the competences you need, if something like that would be there. I think we're right before that, and there is also, as I know from the university here, there's also projects in that direction. So I know that we're shortly before there's the next step, but so far we haven't reached that.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for this very useful study. One question maybe from a more practical point of view. So what would you say are like the biggest challenges in practice? Is it more like technology, or is it process? Is it time?
I think it depends on how long you've been a journalist, because I sometimes have the feeling, well, I'm pretty sure it's true, that my age is, for example, sometimes not to my advantage, because older colleagues have much more people they know, and they have a base of trust, and they get more information because they've been in the business and they know who people are, and they've met them regularly for coffee or something. But on the other side, there are some things that you can learn really fast and where you have a different mindset. I also think that I sometimes have an advantage when it comes to data or some online tools, because I've been taught all of that already in my education, and I don't need to learn now how to do, I don't know, some kind of bar chart in Excel or whatsoever, because I know it's how you do it in DataWrap, and I can play around with what kind of visualization do you take. And the other thing, which is probably kind of hard, is how to do research, because you only need to know where you can find sources, like how much information can you find in the parliament, how much can you find in different databases, what kind of international databases are there, how do you look at the Grundbuch or the Firmenbuch, and that's probably also a little bit of difficult to learn it in the beginning.
Yeah. Just to add on that, the complexity that is sometimes also the result of this process is then the second challenge, I'd say. So there's a lot of complexity coming out, and you have to somehow visualize it. And the tool that you're developing, for example, will help in this regard. But that's the second challenge after that.
Any other questions? Then let's thank the speakers again. And we welcome for our last talk Christian Märtin, and he will talk about modeling user interface adaptation for customer experience optimization.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to my presentation, and thank you for still being here after a long day. I have to apologize a little bit. My voice is a little rough today. I caught a cold recently, but I think you will understand me nevertheless. I will talk about modeling user interface adaptation for customer experience optimization. The topics of my talk will be a little definition what context and situation awareness are. Then we will show how we have integrated our work into an existing framework. Some of you might already have heard of the PAMGIS framework. We have presented it here several years ago. It's now a finished system, and the PhD thesis was done with it, which it has now finished already. And then we will talk a little bit about our new architecture, the SIT-Adapt 2.0 architecture. We had a poster last year about this architecture here. And we are now going into a real practical work, especially with the e-business companies. And we have started with a very attractive company. It's a medium-sized German enterprise that produces cosmetics and beauty products, and user experience, customer experience in this part might be quite interesting, we thought, and so we started to use our sit-up system within this industry. Yes, what is situation awareness? Situation awareness can be seen as a new approach to software engineering, or new path in software engineering. It uses monitoring environments and tools for developing individualized and adaptive software applications that can find out about the steadily changing mental state of the user. The term was coined by Carl Chang from the Iowa State University. We are in contact with him, and we were very inspired by his work. So we tried to build our own system that follows these principles. The main application domain for our research in situation analytics is currently the e-business domain, but there could also be work in medical applications, for example, or also in Industry 4.0 applications. What is a situation? We use the definition by Chang. Situation is defined as a sequence of triples, SIT equals MBE, where E denotes the user's operational environment, his computers, the software he is using, the applications he is using, the interaction techniques he is using, and so on. B is the user's behavior, and M is a hidden context that includes the user's mental state and also the user's emotions. With a sequence of such situations, the sequence S, the situational changes between the beginning of the usage of an application or service up to the goal-satisfying final situation can be modeled. That means whether the user has accomplished his or her task or not, or for example in the e-business domain, whether he has bought something or not, or whether we have held him or her on our website for a long time, and whether he might come again and visit us again. SIT-adapt, our system, was inspired by this definition. We also define sequences of raw situations that combine the attributes and values of the recorded situation analytics and metadata over time. The raw sequence are all stored in a database. The raw sequence are captured every 100th of a second. Yes, every 100th of a second we are capturing a raw situation. The raw situations then are compressed automatically into a situation profile or into different situation profiles that hold the significant information about the current situations. And the situations that can then be accessed by the components of the system in order to find out about new emotional states, about the current biometrical values, the current interactions of the users with exactly identified parts of the user interface. So we have an observing part. This is a very important part, and we do not have to use the adaptation part always. Can use this observing part and find valuable conclusions, but we have also an adaptive part, an adaptation part, and we are using patterns and modeling resources of the PEMGIS framework to create decisions and the resources for the adaptation process. Some of you might know this overall picture. The new component is the red one. It's the sit-adaptation component. it's interacting mainly with the context of use model, the user model, the device models, the UI toolkit models, the environment model, but also with the currently designed or currently already at work, currently already operating user interface model with the abstract model, abstract user interface model, concrete user interface model, and the final user interface model, for example, a Java application or a web-based app or an Android app or an iOS app or something like this. And for true situation-aware systems, sometimes that also are interacting with the content. For example, if you find out that the user remains on a specific website very long, and we are tracking his gaze, and he is looking on the same product all over and all over again, and we can find out this product is very expensive. So there might be an interest. We can find out about her emotions, and we can find that she is very happy, but on the other hand, doesn't hold this expression for very long. So sometimes we could offer her a voucher for her next purchase if she decides to buy the product within the next 30 minutes. This is just an example. Whether it's moral or ethically, we have not we have not done research about this up to now. But this would be possible, such things. Yes, this is the user model. I won't explain it in detail, but we can find out about the a priori abilities of the user. They are stored, but we can find also about the current features of the user, the pulse, the blood pressure, the pulse change rate, and also the E4 data set is a wristband. We can find about resistance of the skin and we can find out about the stress level, or we can find out about very many different things. And we use this architecture. This is the sit-adapt prototype. So it's not a prototype anymore. It's already in version 2.0, but we will further develop it. Currently, we are combining a Tobii eye tracker. We are combining with the face reader software by Noldus for emotion recognition. We do visual emotion recognition. It's very high quality emotion recognition. Then we have the empathical wristband. Then we use the classical metadata from the browser and the application. And we are filming the user with video cameras and so on. We could also do some after work research with the data for data mining. And so we are gathering lots of data. And the recording component synchronizes and records all these data into a database. And there's the situation analytics component that uses rules from the rule editor, which are based on specific situation patterns. And if the situation patterns are similar to the data values found in the situation profiles, then such a rule can fire and can execute an adaptation in real time. So the application will change in real time because we have monitored the user and we have found out something about her or him. Let me give you just a small example of a rule editor. We can build such rules, but the rules can be much more complicated, but it's a very, very easy rule. If mouth equals to open and the user is scared, we can ask him a question. The system can ask him a question. what are you afraid of, for example. But we could change the layouts, we could change the colors of the screen, we could introduce new objects and nearly everything, but we describe all these changes with patterns, with user interface patterns, which are stored in a database and which are thrown out of the database, adapted a little bit, and put on the screen. That's just another rule. You can find them also in the paper. So let me give you 2 examples from the customer journey with the cosmetics industry. Yes, customer experience can be seen as a multidimensional construct that focuses on a customer's cognitive, emotional, behavioral, sensorial, and social reactions to the offerings of a provider or a business during the customer's entire purchase journey. This was done before. This is from a user test. We did a usability test and a user experience test in our usability lab, and with 9 participants, female participants, and we had a pre-test and a post-test. We knew who of the participants were already customers and who were new to the business. And we found out, for example, that the customers, they don't look so long on the products. They know the products already. They are looking on the face and on the beauty aspects of the website, whereas the new customers, they are reading in detail everything what they can get about the information. And we find out, and we can mine new rules from this. We can use this for mining new rules that can later be used to adapt the system. This is an example what can trigger an adaptation. We have a user. They had a task to find a winter care product that is especially for her skin quality. And when she found a new customer, not an existing customer, when she found the product, they're at exactly the same time, her expression changed to happy. And what could be done? A situation profile can be created from the situation with all the relevant data, and the possible adaptation could show additional winter products, for example, or offer a voucher or something like this, if the user is not yet ready for the purchase. So let me conclude our system. I have not shown you real adaptations, but it was a short paper, so I had to limit our space. But we can do real adaptations. Citadap provides a flexible and stable architecture for building runtime adaptive interactive systems within a model and pattern-based framework. It integrates and synchronizes multiple monitoring devices. The system is practically used for user experience and mining typical user personas, currently in a large commercial beauty and cosmetics portal. To evaluate and to improve the rule editor and to test pattern-based adaptation, a test environment for long-distance travel booking was also implemented. It's a second discipline, also near to the e-business discipline. Our research activities in the near future will be directed at providing runtime adaptations for reaching the business goals and enjoying optimum user experiences. We also will include electroencephalogram recordings. We already have acquired such a system, and we will compare the data to the data we received from other sources for finding out something more. Okay, it's not a small system but can be used in every computer. It's a lab environment, but the potential for future use are huge. Thank you.
I have one. Thank you, I have one. Thanks. Any questions?
Hello, thank you for your interesting research. I have a question. If you, in a very hypothetical scenario, would have a huge amount of resources, economical, I mean, would you still do this research, or that is probably sponsored by cosmetic industry, or would you rather do something else, and what would that be? Because you are very talented in the technology, so what would this, I don't know.
Yes, thank you. That's a very fair question. I thank you very much for it. Well, we have a very good cooperation with our cosmetics partners, a long time and a fruitful cooperation. But of course, there are other fields of applications. And one application we are planning for the near future is to build a Parkinson assistant. It's an assistant for people with Parkinson disease. And there are some approaches, but they are rather hardware-based that find about the current state of the Parkinson patient. And we want to ease their lives, that they can be at home as long as and be a normal conditions. For example, in the traffic situation, when they are squaring a road or something like this, and sometimes they got blockades, motion blockades, and such blockades can be found out with some of the sensors we already have. And what will then be done will be, we will find out a situation rule. We will find this is a typical situation, and then we will trigger, for example, a communication with the user that, for example, auditory that is speaking with the user, speak calm, try to focus, try to start your way or something. I'm not a physicist, but we are cooperating with a new clinic of the University of Augsburg, and also we are trying to cooperate with the University of Erlangen-Nürnberg, and we are trying to start a project where we can put our things into the larger project.
There is another question.
So my question regards the ethics of this. How do you deal with ethics? And I mean, this can be used in very manipulative ways. And what boundaries do you set yourself? And how do you deal with the ethics of corporations and the manipulative powers of this?
Okay, thank you. Up to now, we have always surrounded these questions because we are still working in a lab environment, and all the users we are working with in the usability tests, they are informed about the tests, and they have to sign a document whether they are that's okay for them. What I see it, it might be very interesting to use some of our findings and some of our technologies in an end user product. But the end user won't be watched by a camera, won't like to be being watched with a camera or so. So there might be possibilities to find correlations between the visual behavior, the visual emotions, and the emotions that can be found out by mouse movements, typing speed, and other metadata. So we think these data would not harm the personality sphere of the users, but on the other hand, it's very attractive to get more information, and perhaps we can do something intermediate by asking the user whether whether it's okay for him to switch on the camera if the data are only used during working time and are stored on his or her computer and then extinguished after the session. But we have not done a real research on this.
So then, if there is no question anymore, let's thank the speaker again. And we come to our last thing we have to do. I think so. I try to start with it, I think. And I'll ask the speaker of the best paper jury. So now they are not anonymously. So I have Michael Zeiller here, and the other persons were Christen, Märtin, and Oliver Hödel. Thanks in advance. Should I hand over the mic to you and you?
Yes, okay, I do. I make it short. Okay. Well, after a day of very interesting presentations and complex papers and terrific ideas, you gave us a very hard job to do. It was we had 3 papers. One was on oral augmentation. One was on augmented reality in Industry 4.0, and we had the graph improvement a paper. So it was a really hard job. We discussed a lot, and because there were different areas, different fields of applications, different types of papers, very complex ones, very interesting ideas in all of them. But in the end, we got a very tight decision. But the winner is "It Pays to Be Lazy," Robert Gaff. Congratulations. Excellent paper.
And I tell what the price is. I think we should do it as well. So it's 1,000 euros, sponsored by the country Lower Austria. Thank you. But we also want to honor the other 2 papers, so I'd like to welcome with me together here Andreas Jackel, I think, is here for. That I tell the names correctly. So the paper was Augmented Reality for Industry 4.0, 4.0 or Architecture and User Experience. Matthias is also here, so come on. So it's an honorable mention award for you. And then we have, last but not least, Marian Weger, with exploration of audit. And the paper title was Exploration of Auditory Augmentation in an Interdisciplinary Prototyping Workshop. So thanks for being here. And I think now I can hand over the mic to Markus for the very last words.
So thank you, Kerstin, as paper chair. Matthias Teppelzau, who was the second paper chair, cannot be here today due to his, let's say, health situation that changed drastically, but not too bad. Don't be worried. Okay, I did say a big thank you at the very beginning of this day already, so I will not stop you longer from spreading out to the remainders of the day that are still out there. But I want to thank all the speakers and also all the contributors to the conference who were submitting and the ones who had also the chance to present. Thank you very much. And I want to thank again our conference hero, Silvia Petrovic-Meyer. Thank you for organizing the conferences this week in such a good way.